Okay guys, so we're going to do a quick review here of how to approach a problem using PPCs, comparative advantage, and trade, and seeing whether trade is beneficial or not for the members or the participants in a trade. So we've got a chart here that shows us the number of t-shirts and cell phones that China and the United States can make. And then we've got three questions underneath that really represent the three major questions we've got to be able to tackle as we cover most of these types of problems. So question number one is the most direct and the kind of simplest setup. Which nation has the absolute advantage in the production of each of the goods above? Absolute advantage, as a reminder, is a discussion of total productivity. So which nation is more productive in the production of each of these goods? So we look at our chart, and in t-shirts, the United States can make 100 to China's 80. The United States is more productive. And in cell phones, the United States can make 20 and China can make 10. So the United States is more productive in cell phones. So we come down here, and our answer is that for shirts, USA, 100 is greater than 80. And for phones, also USA, because 20 is greater than 10 in terms of total production. On to question number two. Which nation has the comparative advantage in the production of each of these goods? The most important thing to remember here is that comparative advantage is a measure of lower opportunity cost. And so in order to really figure out who's got our advantages here, we need to do a little bit of work. We need to figure out what the opportunity costs are for each of the nations in this arrangement. So for the United States, they can produce either 100 shirts or 20 cell phones. That means that if they produce 20 cell phones, they have to give up 100 shirts. So every cell phone costs 5 shirts. For China, when they produce their 10 cell phones, they are giving up 80 shirts. So every shirt costs, or every cell phone costs 8 shirts. The opposite side of this chart is always going to be the reciprocal here. So 20 over 100 is going to give us 1/5 of a phone for the US cost of a t-shirt. And China is going to do 10 over 80, which is 1/8 of a phone for their cost of a t-shirt. Most important thing to notice here before we move anywhere is notice that the cost of a shirt is measured in phones and the cost of a phone is measured in shirts. It's important that you slow down and use your units here. So in t-shirt production, the US gives up 1/5 of a phone and China gives up 1/8 of a phone. We're looking for the lower number here. So China's 1/8 of a phone gives them the comparative advantage. In the cost of cell phones, the US gives up 5 shirts and China gives up 8 shirts. So the 5 shirts that the United States gives up is the lower cost. So in shirt production, we can say that China has a lower cost, 1/8 versus 1/5 of a phone. And in phone production, the USA has a lower cost because 5 versus 8 shirts given up. Parts 1 and 2 here are kind of our most direct questions that we deal with in these types of problems. It's the bottom problem here that gives most students the most trouble as we have lots of numbers moving around and we have to kind of slow this down. If the United States agrees to produce and sell 10 cell phones to China in exchange for 40 shirts, is this a beneficial deal for both nations? Here, well, there are a lot of ways to approach this. Here's the way that I think I would approach this problem right now. I would break this into two separate questions. What cost does the US pay to make 10 phones? So to ask that, we have to say if they want 10 phones, each phone costs them 5 shirts. So 10 phones times 5 shirts per phone our phone units get crossed out here, means that they pay 50 shirts to produce 10 phones. So what cost does the United States pay to make 10 phones? They pay a cost of 50 shirts. So let's return to the question. Would the United States be willing to sell 10 cell phones and receive only 40 shirts in return? We would say that 40 shirts is not a good deal for the United States. They are not making back their cost of production. Meanwhile, we can reverse this. What cost does China pay to make 10 phones? Well, China's 10 phones times their cost up here of 8 shirts per phone. And again, we can cross out our units and see that it would cost them 80 shirts to make 10 phones. So we go back to the trade. Would they be willing to pay 40 shirts to receive 10 cell phones? And we would say that 40 shirts is a good deal for China. China here would be taking advantage of a lower cost, 40 shirts being less than 80, where the United States would be taking a loss, 40 shirts not covering the 50 shirt value that they are paying to produce the shirts in the first place. So what we can say here is that our answer is that this is not a good deal for the United States because it cost them 50. Meanwhile, it is a good deal for China because their cost would be 80. Slow these problems down, same 3 questions almost every time, identifying absolute advantage, identifying comparative advantage using opportunity cost, and then applying that opportunity cost to a problem where we may or may not have a beneficial trade for both nations. Remember, the shortcut here is that the beneficial trade is going to provide an opportunity cost that sits in between these two units. 40 or 4 to 10 is outside of this 5 to 8 window that we are looking for. But anything between 5 and 8 would mean the United States is receiving more shirts in return than it pays, and China is paying fewer shirts than it takes them to make the cell phone in the first place.